Hi, and welcome to the second demo video of the Bahmni-SNOMED integration. In this video, we will see how Bahmni uses CDSS to invoke alert notifications for any negative drug diagnosis interaction using SNOMED clinical terminologies. So before we begin with the demos, let's understand what is CDSS. So CDSS is a system that enhances the decision making of healthcare professionals. So it takes into account the patient's information and its clinical knowledge base to improve the healthcare for patients. It helps clinician avoid any negative interaction between drug diagnosis, drugs, or drugs allergies, etc. So it provides additional information to the clinicians to take an informed decision about any prescription of drug for a diagnosis or for an allergy, etc. So there are many forms of CDSS. So some of the benefits of CDSS are that it curbs the preventable mistakes that can happen while prescribing drugs for the patient, boost clinician efficiency, improve patient healthcare quality, and also reduce cost by reducing or avoiding unnecessary medications and procedures. For our Bahmni-SNOMED engagement, we have implemented the drug diagnosis interaction for phase 1, where the clinicians are notified with an alert when the drug and the diagnosis introduction is contraindicated. Once the alert is shown in the screen, clinicians can accept the alert and make the changes to the medication, or the clinicians can choose to dismiss the alert by providing reason for dismissal. Now, let's understand the CDSS implementation in Bahmni by the help of a diagram. So in this diagram, we can see that there are dev and QA instance, which houses the Bahmni application, and the CDSS engine, which contains the CDSS rules. The other instance that we have is the Snowstorm instance, which houses the SNOMED clinical terminologies. Right. So at the beginning of the CDSS, right? So once the CDSS server is launched, it first of all prefetches the descendants of for the CDSS rules using FHIR, meaning whatever rules that we have described in the CDSS, while at the time of launch, it will refer the Snowstorm server and prefetch all the descendants of the CDSS rules by using FHIR. For example, let's say if a particular diagnosis, asthma, is having a contraindicatory with a drug called propranolol. So asthma, along with all its descendants, will have a negative interaction with propranolol, right? So CDSS refers to the Snowstorm server, fetches all the descendants of asthma, and stores it in its rules. So that is the first part which takes place when the CDSS server is launched. Once the CDSS server is full of CDSS rules, now the user from the UI provides the conditions or the medications into the Bahmni application. From there, the draft condition and the medications is sent to the backend. Backend, on the other hand, it uses FHIR and it transfers the conditions and medications, which are both saved and draft ones, into the CDSS server rules. In the CDSS server, the rules are processed, and if there are any alert responses, it sends those alerts responses to the backend. Backend, on the other hand, displays these alerts to the UI, and the UI again displays the alerts to the users. For our demo purposes, we have currently provided a simplistic custom CDSS service, which has been written to showcase the functionality. let me show the rules that currently we have for the CDSS server. Now, if you can see here, there is UIID, the medication, right? So there are two information which are passed through the CDSS server, right? So one is the diagnosis or the condition. The second part is the medication, right? So these are the medications and its corresponding codes, right? And it's the second column is the diagnosis or the condition which is contraindicating with this medication, and it also has its own SNOMED code, right? So when the CDSS rule or its CDSS server is launched for the first time, it refers to the snowstorm server and fetches all the descendants of this particular finding and stores it as a part of its rule. Now, these rules also provide an indication, right? So, like an alert can be of three types in Bahmni, which are warning, info, and critical. So, this column gives an information about that. The other details are like, the card summary, the card details, and the source. This we will be seeing in the demo as well. So, these are the limited set of rules currently we have for simplistic version to demonstrate the functionality of CDSS. Now let's move to the demo. I open the URL for the Bahmni. I click on clinical service, provide the credentials. I come to the clinical tab. So I see an active patient. I click on it. So this is the dashboard of the patient, which provides information about its visits, diagnosis, treatments, etc. So I come here and click on consultation. Under diagnosis tab. So here I will be able to provide the diagnosis for the patient. Now let's refer the rule book that we have for CDSS, right? So in this case, if we see asthma and propranolol are the drug and diagnosis interaction which are contraindicatory. So let's try this. And for asthma, the SNOMED code is this, and for propranolol, the SNOMED code is this one. As we have seen earlier that in Bahmni, we will be able to search for any SNOMED diagnosis term through codes as well. So let's try this with a code. So I take this code, click on it. So I get asthma, right? So I take asthma, provide other information as well. And since I have provided all the information, now without saving as a draft, I move to the medications tab. Under medications, now we see that propranolol is a contraindicatory drug and its SNOMED code is this one. Now, these drugs are prefetched into the Bahmni application and hence it is available there. So now let's say if I search for propranolol, okay, I select one of the tablets. Now, as soon as I selected, right, since these two interactions are contraindicatory, I got a critical message. So it summarizes that propranolol 40 mg with patient condition asthma is contraindication. And the rule book also says the same, that the warning that we are going to show is basically critical and this is the contraindication, right? Now, user can also expand this to get more details about the contraindication. So this is the some detail of the contraindication that the use of propranolol is contraindicated when the patient has asthma, right? The question mark is basically defines the link. So if the user wants to know more about this contraindication, so it also has a link to it. As soon as the user clicks on it, it is taken to that reference link. In our case, it is the Wikipedia. So it also shows the contraindications here. Right. Now, as I mentioned earlier, for critical alerts, the user or the clinician will not be able to dismiss these alerts unless they provide a reason for dismissal. Right. Now, here we can see that the add button is disabled. Right. So, unless the user provides a reason for dismissal, the add button will not be activated. So here, let's say the clinician provides any reason for dismissal. We have various reasons for it, like the alert was triggered, but it was a false positive, or the alert does not apply to the patient in question, etc. So let's choose one of it. As soon as I choose one, I get the dismiss button and I click on it. As soon as I click on it, we see that the alert is now cleared and the add button is now enabled. Now I can go ahead and add the dosages. Provide the durations and click on add. Now if you see here, the medication is now added to the prescription of the patient, right? Now let's look into another scenario. Now since we have seen for asthma, right? So it should be possible that all the other descendants of asthma should also be contraindicated with propranolol. So let's see if that is happening as well or not. So let me go to the SNOMED CT browser. As I mentioned in the previous video that for all our demo purposes, we are using the international edition. So here, let's type asthma. So here we can see that there are around 27 descendants of asthma, right? Now let's try with allergic asthma, right? So we have one colophony asthma. Okay, since this is the descendant of asthma, so let's see if a CDSS rule is invoked for the colophony asthma or not. So I go back to my application. Here I type colophony asthma. I take it. Okay. And again, come back to the medications. Right. Again, I select for propranolol. As soon as I select that medication, again a critical message is shown that propranolol 40 mg is contraindicating with colophony asthma. So in this way, we can see it's not just the diagnosis, but the descendants of those diagnoses will also be considered while the CDSS is processing its rules. So similarly, it can be dismissed by providing any reason. So this is one part, right? So we are just showing a critical alert. So there are two types of other alerts as well. Let's see. Okay. Now let's come back to diagnosis. I'll clear these. Let's come to our rules. Now, if we see here, the medication acetazolamide has multiple negative interactions with number of other conditions, right? So let's try to have these conditions in our application. Okay, so let's say first one we will take as hypotremia. I go here, take it. This time I save it so that it becomes part of the diagnosis, right? Okay. Now let's take another diagnosis, which is hypokalemia. I come back to diagnosis, provide the word, select it, certainty confirm. This one, let's keep it as a draft, right? Now let's come to the medications tab. Here, now we see for these two conditions, acetazolamide has a negative interaction. So let's provide acetazolamide, right? So as soon as we provided that, we see multiple alert warnings, right? So each interaction will have a different card. So that is what I'm trying to show, that there can be multiple alerts for a single drug diagnosis interaction, or there can be more than one for each drug diagnosis interaction. So here we see that we get a warning message for both hypokalemia and hyponatremia, right? However, unlike the critical alert, the clinician or the user will be able to dismiss this without providing any justification to it. So by clicking on the cross button, and also before that, we see that the add button is not disabled here, right? So this is applicable only in case of critical alerts. So the user can go and click on cross button and they can dismiss the warnings, and can click on add button and remove and add the, yeah, provide the other details, can go ahead and add the drug. Right. So this is how the CDSS is being used in Bahmni for the drug diagnosis interaction to notify the users about any negative interaction. Now let's see what are the features that we have implemented for this alerts, right? So there are three different severities, right? The critical, warning, and info. We saw for the warning and the critical, right? And as I mentioned that a drug and diagnosis interaction can have multiple alerts. It's based on the rules that uh, we have written, or the rules which are present in the CDSS server, right? We have also seen that it consists of the summary and the details. So summary is mandatory, and if the user wants to see more details of it, they can click on the lower arrow button and get the details. It also has the link to the source of information. And the last, that the clinician can choose to override the critical alerts by providing the justification. So in this video, we saw that when someone uses SNOMED CT for recording diagnosis and drugs in Bahmni, then we can use the FHIR enabled CDSS server to provide alerts across the drug diagnosis contraindications easily across the hierarchy of drugs and diagnosis without requiring the rules to be specified in each case. Now, for our phase 2 planning, we are also trying to implement the CDSS for the drug and the drug interaction. So if a drug-drug interaction is contraindicatory, the clinician will be getting the alert messages like we have currently for drug diagnosis interaction. And with respect to these rules will be kept enhancing as and when we have more rules with respect to drug and diagnosis, and this will make the CDSS server more efficient. With this, I would like to conclude the demo video. Thank you so much.